Hello, BookTube. We're back down in puppy territory for another library tour, this impromptu library tour that we're going through. And here is the aforementioned puppy. There you go. Hi, BookTube. And our first two books are by the same guy, Roger Lancelyn Green, who I've praised before on this channel. Wrote kids' books about a century ago, mostly retelling mythology. And that's what these are. This is Tales of Ancient Egypt and Myths of the Norsemen. Oh God, I've got some morning sunlight there. Two wonderful retellings of they're boglerized, they're for children, so they're simplified. But he's a wonderful narrative storyteller. So what you lose in the complexity of the originals, you get back in just reading a wonderful story. Much like Longfellow, like his A Wonder Book, where he does the same thing. Then we've got another one of these, a duplicate of Nineman's book on St. Mark. Just one of these old these great Pelican scripture commentaries. And then a bunch of classics. Oh, goodness. Okay, we've done some of these before. I must have shifted these around. See, that's the problem with library tours for me, is that I shift my books around all the time, looking for things and using things and consulting things, so that nothing's the same. We could go through a library tour back in the other room. We went through that bookcase by bookcase. If we did it again, it would be substantially different. This is the Prosetta in Oxford World Classics, and then Jason and the Golden Fleece, the Argonautica, Oxford World Classics, and the Satyricon by Petronius in Oxford World Classics. But we go on to some that we haven't seen, like this. This is a Neil Rudd translation of the Satires of Juvenal, which I just love. I think they're fantastic. And I remember this volume being really good as far as Latin translation goes. Then Nordic sagas. This is Eric the Red, the saga of Eric the Red. And there are other little sagas in here as well. Penguin did the whole series of Nordic sagas. I love them. I think they're fantastic. Still criminally underrated in terms of classics that people know in the West. Because they've got everything, and yet people don't know them anywhere near as well as they know, for instance, the Iliad or the Aeneid or the Divine Comedy or anything like that. Anything of quasi-fantastic nature in it. But this was an Oxford version, very good. The Saga of Eric the Red is very good. Then, an old friend, a totally tough sell on BookTube, but this is the Venerable Bede. This is Ecclesiastic History of the English Peoples, which is just back when he wrote it so long ago that civilization was basically the equivalent of the church. And you could tell a history of a nation by telling the history of its Christianity and its Christian institutions. And that's what he does. But Bede he can't suppress. His goal is to tell an ecclesiastical history, but he can't suppress his natural talent for stories. And so the ecclesiastical history is full of great stories. You would never know it by that title. And with a Wikipedia description of what it is, you would never think that it was good reading. But I'm telling you, it is. I'm going to go back to ancient Rome. These are the love poems of Ovid. They do not translate. They simply do not translate. They don't. This is the translation by A.D. Melville. A.D. Melville does a really earnest job, but they do not translate. So I basically have this for its introduction and notes, which are always fascinating. Then St. Agustin. This is a collection of Christian teaching. This is not his Confessions, and this is not his enormous City of God. This is just a very thin thing of liturgical writings of St. Augustine. The type of thing that almost never gets a popular paperback. You would never get a popular paperback reprint in a new translation again. Because we have been told, as we've been told by the President of the United States, and about him, we live in a post-literate age. But still, Agustin on anything is wonderful. Then we have someone I have a long and fraught history with. This is the Gallic War of Julius Caesar. That is a detail from a cover painting in which he is chastising his Gaulish prisoners, including Vercingetorix. And this is an English language translation by Carolyn Hammond, which again I read only for the introduction and the notes. She has a really good introduction to Caesar, but I grow less and less patient with Latin translations. So then we have finally, we're not doing a translation. We're doing the next three are English language books. This is the autobiography of Anthony Trollope, which you would think sounds very staid and dusty, but this is a scandalous book. This did more to harm his posthumous reputation than anything that any enemy could have done. This, I believe firmly, is the reason we don't typically equate him with Dickens. Why Dickens is considered great and Trollope is considered something less than great, something workmanlike. And the reason why he's considered that is because that's how he describes himself in this book. It's utterly fascinating. He talks about publisher contracts and annual salaries and bumps for serialization and how important the money was. Nobody talked that way. In his level of prominence in Victorian England, nobody talked that way. To write it in a book that you intended for publication, even posthumously, was extremely daring. And it's, of course, even when talking about himself, Trollope can't help but, again, there's a theme running through here, he can't help but be a great storyteller. So this is, in addition to being scandalous and groundbreaking, this is also one of the most enjoyable literary autobiographies that exists. And I highly recommend it. And then we'll stick with Trollope for this next book. This is the old Oxford mass market of The Duke's Children, my favorite Anthony Trollope novel, in which the last of the Palliser novels, in which our august Duke of Omnium, Plantagenet Palliser, is suddenly bereft of his wife, Trollope's best character. She dies in the interval between the last book and this book. And so the Duke is faced with his daughter who wants to marry a man who's not of their social status. And it is, as Trollope pretty much says throughout this book, it's a problem that would have been trivial for the Duchess. Not only to solve, but to bring the Duke around to her solution. But he himself is completely out of his depth. Not only dealing with progressive social issues, he's firmly fixed in the past. He doesn't know any. He knows that the world is changing, but he has no interest in those changes and no interest in embracing them. But not only is he out of his depth in that, but he's also out of his depth simply parenting. He really doesn't know his own children. That was the Duchess's job, and her friend, Mrs. Finn. It's not his. So he's comically out of his depth in this book, but it's not entirely funny. There's a sadness to it. It's Trollope saying goodbye to a lot. Not just the Palliser books, because I firmly agree with the literary speculation that says that he was contemplating another book after this one. I think he wasn't quite done with transitioning this whole family into a more adult world, a more modern world. But also him saying goodbye to just the Duke's old world, the noblesse oblige world of the Duke of Omnium. I love it. I absolutely love the book, which is why I have this thing. You can't really tell in this morning light that this has been. I've reinforced it twice. It's falling apart. I just love this. This was the paperback that I read out and about on my travels and fell in love with. And I can't bear to get rid of it. And then the last one for now is a penguin. This is the old orange-spined English library penguin of Moll Flanders, Daniel Defoe's Moll Flanders. Daniel Defoe being a criminally underrated author, I think, and somebody whose own biography, I wish that there were more about him. I wish that he stood out more instead of having just a couple of books that are sometimes taught in school. I never meet people for whom Defoe is a favorite, and I almost never meet anybody who knows the extent of what he wrote. They think it was a couple of novels, when actually he wrote for his whole life and broke ground in almost every field that he wrote in. And was fascinating even outside the world of literature. So I don't quite know why I have this little mass market of Moll Flanders. I don't think I'm ever going to read that physical copy again. But that's kind of a theme with this entire library of mine. What are these books doing here? but anyway, we'll solve that question another time. I'm going to go before the sun consumes me completely. But I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.